Every breath you take is carrying a message meant only for you. Most people inhale, exhale, and miss it completely. Stay with me till the very end, because the final lessons will truly change how you experience life itself. You are here because somewhere deep inside you feel restless. You may be successful, educated, busy, yet something feels incomplete. Your mind is crowded, your heart is tired, and your soul feels unheard. And nobody ever told you this simple truth: you are searching everywhere. While the answer has been moving in and out of you since the day you were born, that answer is hidden in your breath, not as philosophy, not as belief, but as living, breathing awareness. Now listen carefully, because this is not information, this is remembrance. Before you learned how to speak, before you learned how to hide your emotions, before you learned how to pretend to be strong, your breath was already telling the truth about you. It still does. The breath has never learned deception. It has never tried to impress anyone. It has never followed society's rules. It simply responds honestly, immediately, without delay. When fear enters you, the breath tightens. When love touches you, the breath softens. When anger burns inside, the breath becomes sharp and restless. When peace arrives, the breath slows like a lake at dawn. This is why the breath is the only truth that never lies. You may smile while breaking inside, but your breath will still tremble. You may say you are calm, but your breath will already have exposed the storm. And this is not a weakness. This is intelligence. Existence has given you a built-in guide, a silent teacher that never leaves your side. But the tragedy is this: you were trained to ignore it. You were taught to listen to thoughts, to opinions, to expectations, to noise, but never to the breath. So you grew up disconnected from the most intimate truth within you. Most people try to fix their lives by changing circumstances. But the breath shows you something deeper. Nothing outside needs to change for awareness to begin. Just watch the breath and honesty returns. When you sit quietly and feel the air entering your nostrils, expanding your chest, touching the depths of your body, you are no longer pretending. In that moment, there is no performance. There is no image to maintain, there is just what is. And truth is always simple. The breath does not shout, it whispers. It says, this is how you are right now. Not how you should be, not how you want to appear, but how you truly are. This is why watching the breath feels uncomfortable at first, because you are finally facing yourself without filters. Many people avoid silence not because silence is empty, but because silence reveals, and breath is the doorway to that revelation. The moment you start observing it, you will notice how restless you actually are, how tense your body has become, how rushed your inner world feels. This is not failure, this is awakening. Awareness always begins with discomfort. Just like muscles ache before they grow stronger, consciousness stings before it expands. The breath is asking you to be courageous enough to see yourself clearly. And once you see clearly, transformation becomes natural. You no longer need to force calmness, because understanding creates relaxation. You no longer need to chase peace, because honesty dissolves conflict. When you accept the truth of your breath, you accept yourself. And acceptance is the foundation of all growth. This is why ancient seekers never said, believe this. They said, observe. Observe your breath and you will see the truth without effort. It is always happening in real time. No past, no future, just now. If you feel lost in life, don't search for answers immediately. Sit, breathe, watch. The breath will show you where you are fragmented, where you are resisting, where you are afraid. And it will also show you something beautiful. That beneath all tension, there is a natural rhythm. Try trying to restore balance. If you stay with this practice slowly, gently, honesty becomes your way of living. You stop lying to yourself. You stop escaping your feelings. You stop blaming the world. And when that happens, clarity appears without struggle. This is only the beginning. If this feels deep, stay with it, because the next lessons go even further, and missing them would mean missing the real transformation. The mind is a restless traveler. It is never where you are. It lives in memories that no longer breathe and futures that have not yet arrived. Even when your body is sitting still, the mind is running, replaying conversations, imagining outcomes, fearing losses, chasing victories. This constant movement creates exhaustion, not because life is heavy, but because attention is scattered. And yet, while the mind is always elsewhere, your breath has never moved away from the present moment. It rises only now. It falls only now. It does not remember yesterday's mistakes, and it does not worry about tomorrow's expectations. It simply is. This is why the breath stays while the mind runs. And this simple difference carries a secret that can free you from years of mental suffering. When you follow the mind, you are dragged into time. When you follow the breath, you return to now, and now is the only place where peace exists. You have never been anxious about the present moment itself. Anxiety is always about what might happen. You have never been depressed about this second. Depression is always about what already happened. The breath anchors you in the only reality that does not hurt. This is why the moment you bring attention to breathing, something subtle begins to shift. The mind resists at first. It tries to pull you back into thinking, because thinking is its survival. But if you gently return to the breath again and again, not aggressively, not forcefully, the mind slowly loses its grip. It cannot dominate the present. It needs distraction to exist. This is why silence feels threatening to it. When you sit with your breath, you are no longer feeding the mind with stories. You are not fighting it either. You are simply not cooperating with its noise. And without cooperation, the mind weakens. This is not suppression, this is transcendence. You are not pushing thoughts away, you are choosing not to follow them. Imagine standing by a road, watching cars pass by. You do not chase them, you do not stop them, you simply watch. The breath becomes that roadside, steady, grounded, unmoving. Thoughts pass, emotions pass, sensations change, but the breath remains your home base. Over time, you will notice that gaps begin to appear between thoughts, not because you forced silence, but because silence is natural when you stop interfering. These gaps are precious. They are moments when you are alive without commentary, no label, no judgment, just presence. And in those moments you realize something deeply liberating. You are not the mind. You are the awareness in which the mind appears. This realization does not come from books or lectures. It comes from sitting with the breath long enough to feel the difference between movement and stillness. The mind runs because it is afraid to stop. It believes that stopping means disappearing. And in a way, it is right. When awareness deepens, the mind loses its authority. But you do not lose yourself. You find yourself. Many people fear being present because they think nothing will remain. But the opposite is true. When you are fully here, you finally experience life directly, without filters. Colors feel brighter, sounds feel richer. Even ordinary moments feel complete. You are no longer rushing toward happiness, you are noticing it quietly existing around you. The breath teaches you this art without effort. You don't need discipline in the traditional sense. You need sincerity, just a willingness to return again and again whenever you notice you've drifted. This returning is not failure, it is practice. Each return strengthens awareness. Each moment with the breath weakens unconscious habits. Slowly, you stop being pulled so easily by every thought. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of assume. You act instead of panic. This is how inner stability is born. And remember, this is still only the second step. If you think this is freeing, stay with me. The lessons ahead go deeper into the very structure of identity itself. And missing them would mean stopping just before the real breakthrough begins. The moment you begin to watch your breath, something subtle but revolutionary starts to happen inside you. You step back. For the first time, you are no longer completely lost in what you feel, think, or react to. You are witnessing it. And this witnessing is the beginning of freedom. The ego survives on one powerful illusion, identification. It whispers, "This is you." Angry thought, "I am angry." Fearful sensation, "I am afraid." Painful memory, "This is who I am." The ego does not exist as a solid thing. It exists as a habit of believing every inner movement is you. But the breath quietly breaks this habit. When you observe the breath, you are no longer inside the story. You are watching the story unfold. You notice the rise and fall of air. You notice tension in the chest. You notice restlessness in the body. And suddenly there is space. The anger is there, but you are not swallowed by it. The fear is there, but it does not own you. This space is dangerous for the ego because the ego cannot survive without total identification. The ego needs you to be unconscious. It needs you to react instantly, emotionally, blindly. Awareness is its greatest threat. That is why when you sit silently with your breath, the ego tries everything to distract you. It creates urgency. It reminds you of unfinished tasks. It brings up random memories. It makes you uncomfortable. Not because meditation is wrong, but because the ego senses its control slipping. And this is where most people quit. They think something is going wrong, when in fact something very right is happening. Watching the breath is not a passive act, it is a radical shift in identity. You are no longer saying, "I am the storm." You are realizing, "I am the sky." Storms come and go, but the sky remains untouched. Thoughts rise, emotions fall, sensations change, but the awareness watching them remains steady. This realization doesn't arrive like a dramatic explosion. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. One day you realize you didn't react the way you used to. Another day you notice a pause before anger. Another day you see fear, but you don't collapse into it. These are signs that the grip of the ego is loosening. And here is the most important insight: the ego is not your enemy. It is a misunderstood survival mechanism. It was formed when you were unconscious, when you needed protection, validation, and control. But now it is outdated. And the breath helps you see this without violence, without judgment. You are not killing the ego, you are outgrowing it. Observation is the sunlight that dissolves the shadows. You don't argue with darkness, you bring light. In the same way, you don't fight the ego, you watch. And as you watch, it loses substance. You begin to feel lighter, not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer carrying false identities. You stop defining yourself by temporary states. You stop saying, "This emotion is me." You start saying, "This emotion is past, in through me." This shift changes everything. Relationships soften because you are no longer defending an image. Challenges feel lighter because failure no longer threatens your identity. You still act, you still care, but you are no longer attached in a way that suffocates you. The breath keeps bringing you back to this witnessing again and again. Each inhale reminds you to arrive. Each exhale reminds you to release. Slowly, watching becomes natural. Awareness spills into daily life. You catch yourself before reacting. You listen more deeply. You speak more consciously. And one day you realize that silence has started to accompany you even in movement. That silence is not emptiness. It is clarity. It is presence. It is the real you. If you stop here, you will feel relief. But if you continue, you will feel transformation. Because the next lessons go beyond observing the ego. They show you how to let go of control itself. And if you miss that, you miss the heart of the journey. Stay with it. The deepest shifts are yet to come. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood ideas in human life. People think letting go means giving up, becoming weak, or losing control. But your breath teaches a completely different truth. Letting go is not loss, it is intelligence. Watch closely. Every inhale happens effortlessly. You do not force life to enter you, it comes on its own. And every exhale is a release. You do not need permission to let go, the body knows how. Life is constant. Lie showing you the rhythm of trust. But the mind keeps interrupting it. The mind wants to hold on to people, to outcomes, to identities, to pain even, because holding feels like control and control feels like safety. But it is an illusion. The breath reveals this gently, without argument. Each breath in is acceptance. Yes, I receive. Each breath out is surrender. Yes, I release. When you start observing this rhythm, you realize how deeply you resist life, you resist change, you resist endings, you resist uncertainty. And this resistance is the root of suffering. You don't suffer because life is difficult. You suffer because you are holding your breath emotionally. You tighten when things don't go your way. You contract when you feel vulnerable. You freeze when fear arises. And just like holding the breath physically creates discomfort, holding emotionally creates pain. The breath shows you that release is not dangerous. It is natural. When you exhale fully, you don't disappear, you are still here. In fact, you make space for the next inhale. Life works the same way. When you let go of what has ended, you make space for what is arriving. But the mind argues. It says, what if I let go and nothing comes? The breath answers silently, something always comes. Existence abhors emptiness. The fear of letting go is rooted in mistrust of life. The breath rebuilds this trust moment by moment. When you sit with your breathing and allow the exhale to complete itself without an interruption, you may feel a brief moment of vulnerability, a gap. That gap is where control dissolves. And in that dissolution, you touch freedom. Most people rush past this moment unconsciously. They inhale quickly because stillness scares them. But if you stay, if you relax into that space after the exhale, you realize something profound. Nothing is missing. You are safe. You are supported. This realization doesn't remain confined to meditation. It starts influencing how you live. You stop clinging to relationships that have outgrown you. You stop forcing outcomes that are not aligned. You stop carrying guilt, regret, and resentment as if they are your responsibility forever. Letting go becomes a strength, not a weakness. You begin to trust timing. You begin to trust flow. You begin to trust yourself. The breath becomes your teacher in difficult moments. When emotions rise, instead of suppressing them or acting them out, you breathe and release. You allow the wave to pass. You don't drown in it. This is emotional maturity, not numbing, not exploding, but allowing. And the more you allow, the lighter you feel. Life no longer feels like a battle, it feels like a dance. You still show up, you still care, but you are no longer gripping life with clenched fists. You are open-palmed, available, alive. This openness attracts clarity, it attracts peace, it attracts the right actions without force. If you think letting go ends here, stay with me, because the next lesson reveals how the breath doesn't just teach release, it teaches mastery. And that understanding can change the way you handle your mind forever. Don't miss it. Most people believe the mind is something that must be fought, silenced, or conquered. They try to overpower thoughts with willpower, suppress emotions, or distract themselves into temporary relief. But the breath reveals a far more elegant truth. The mind does not need to be controlled directly. It follows the breath naturally. The breath is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, between the body and the mind. It moves on its own, yet it can be gently guided. And this is why it holds such power. When your breath is fast, shallow, and irregular, your mind mirrors that chaos. Thoughts multiply, anxiety grows, and emotions feel overwhelming. But when you slow the breath, not by force but by awareness, the nervous system begins to relax. The body receives a signal of safety, and when the body feels safe, the mind has no reason to panic. This is not philosophy, it is lived experience. Try it in a moment of stress. Instead of arguing with your thoughts, slow your breathing. Lengthen the exhale slightly. Feel the air moving deeper into the belly. Within moments, you will notice a shift. The noise softens, the urgency fades, the storm begins to settle. The breath is the remote control of consciousness because it speaks the language of the body and the body speaks to the mind. When you understand this, you stop wasting energy fighting thoughts. You work with the system, not against it. This approach is compassionate, not violent. It does not create inner conflict. It creates harmony. Over time, this awareness changes your relationship with emotions. You no longer fear sadness, anger, or fear because you know how to stay grounded while they pass through. You breathe with them, not against them. And because you are not resisting, they lose intensity. Emotions want to be felt, not judged. The breath gives them space to move and dissolve. This is why people who meditate deeply often appear calm even in chaos. They are not detached, they are regulated. They have learned to remain connected to their breath when life becomes overwhelming. Slowly, this skill becomes automatic. Your breathing remains steady in difficult conversations. Your nervous system recovers faster from stress. You stop reacting impulsively. You gain the ability to pause. And in that pause, wisdom enters. This is self-mastery, not domination, but understanding. You are no longer a victim of inner turbulence. You are a participant in your own balance. And this mastery does not make you cold or distant. It makes you more present, more compassionate, more alive. Because when the mind is not noisy, the heart becomes audible. You begin to listen deeply, you speak more intentionally, you feel more fully without being overwhelmed. The breath trains you for life's intensity without burning you out. It teaches you that calm is not the absence of challenges. It is the ability to meet challenges without losing yourself. This is why conscious breathing is not just a meditation practice. It is a way of living. It supports you in meetings, in relationships, in solitude, in uncertainty. And if this feels powerful, stay with it. Because the next lesson does not just bring calm, it reveals a doorway to something timeless, something beyond the mind itself. Missing it would mean stopping just before the deepest discovery. There is a moment so subtle that most people miss it their entire lives. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. And yet, it is the most sacred doorway you will ever encounter. It lives in the smallest space, the pause between breaths. After the exhale finishes, before the inhale begins, there is a gap. That gap is not empty. It is full of truth. But the mind hates it, because in that gap, the mind has no job, no memory, no future, no identity to protect. The gap is pure presence, and presence feels like death to the ego. That is why most people unconsciously rush their breathing. They are afraid of stillness, afraid of nothingness, afraid of disappearing. But what actually disappears in that gap is not you. It is the noise pretending to be you. When you begin to notice this pause, even for a fraction of a second, something profound happens. Time loosens its grip. You are no longer moving from moment to moment. You are resting in being. This is why the ancient mystics said, truth is not found through effort, but through stopping. Not stopping action, stopping inner movement. The breath leads you naturally. You don't have to chase silence. You don't have to force awareness. You simply notice the gap. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, like standing at the edge of something vast. The mind immediately tries to fill it with a thought, a distraction, a need to inhale quickly. But if you stay relaxed, if you trust the body's intelligence, you will discover that nothing goes wrong when you don't rush. In fact, something incredibly right happens. You feel grounded, whole, enough. In that gap, there is no problem to solve, because the one who creates problems is quiet. There is no fear, because fear needs time to exist. There is no desire, because desire is always about what comes next. The gap has no next. It is complete. This is why it is said that enlightenment is not a peak experience, but a deep rest into what already is. You don't become something new in that pause. You remember something ancient, something you were before you learned to strive, before you learned to compare, before you learned to chase meaning instead of inhabiting it. Many people touch this gap unknowingly, in moments of awe, in deep love, in shock, in exhaustion, in silence, and they call it peace or grace or God. But because they don't understand it, they lose it again. Conscious breathing allows you to enter it deliberately, gently, without drama. And the more familiar you become with this pause, the less afraid you are of silence in life. You stop needing constant stimulation. You stop fearing being alone. You stop escaping into noise. You realize that stillness is not boring. It is nourishing. It is home. This changes the way you relate to everything. You no longer rush conversations. You allow moments to breathe. You no longer panic in uncertainty. You rest inside it. You no longer feel empty when nothing is happening. You feel full. The gap teaches you that you are not sustained by movement, but by being. And once you taste this, even briefly, something irreversible happens. You cannot fully believe the mind again when it tells you that happiness is somewhere else. You have felt completeness without achievement. You have touched meaning without explanation. And you begin to live from that knowing. This is why this lesson is rarely taught clearly, because it cannot be sold, improved, or owned. It can only be noticed. And now listen carefully. If you think this is the destination, stay with me. Because the final realization is not just about touching truth in meditation. It is about living it in every ordinary moment. And that changes everything. When breath becomes conscious, life stops being ordinary. Not because the world changes, but because you change the way you meet it. Most people live as if life is something to get through, a series of problems to solve, responsibilities to carry, days to survive. Breathing happens in the background, unnoticed, mechanical, rushed. And because breath is unconscious, life feels unconscious. But the moment you bring awareness to breathing, something sacred enters your daily existence. You begin to live on purpose, not with tension, not with ambition, but with presence. Conscious breath turns routine into ritual. Walking becomes meditation. Eating becomes gratitude. Listening becomes love. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are participating in your own life. This is the final transformation, not escape from the world, but deep intimacy with it. When you breathe consciously, you stop rushing moments. You stop skipping through life waiting for something better. You realize this is it. This moment, this breath, this experience, this is where life is happening. And when you are fully here, even simple things carry depth. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of silence, the feeling of being alive in your body. Nothing is taken for granted anymore. This awareness naturally brings reverence. You don't need to believe in anything spiritual. Life itself feels sacred. You treat people differently. You speak with more care. You listen without preparing a reply. You feel gratitude without forcing it. Because gratitude is not a practice, it is a consequence of awareness. When you are present, you cannot help but appreciate. Conscious breathing also dissolves fear of death because it teaches you impermanence without terror. Every breath comes and goes, and yet something remains watching, something stable, something untouched. You realize that endings are not enemies. They are transitions. This understanding softens your relationship with loss, change, and uncertainty. You still feel pain, but you don't collapse under it. You feel sadness, but you don't drown in it. Life flows through you instead of against you. This is what it means to live consciously. You are no longer waiting for enlightenment as an event. You are living it as a way of being. There is no separation between meditation and life. Every breath is practice, every moment is teaching, and this awareness does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You act when action is needed. You rest when rest is needed. You speak when truth is needed. You remain silent when silence is wiser. There is an intelligence guiding you that is deeper than thought, and it comes from presence. This is why the masters never looked in a hurry. They were not slow, they were aligned. When breath, body, and awareness move together, life becomes effortless. Not easy, but meaningful. You stop asking, "What is my purpose?" because you feel it in how you live. Purpose is no longer a goal, it is a quality of attention. And now, as this journey comes to a close, remember this timeless truth echoed by Osho: life is not something to be achieved, it is something to be lived consciously. The quality of your life is determined by the depth of your awareness and the courage to stay present. You don't need more time, you don't need more knowledge, you don't need to become someone else. You only need to breathe and be aware. Begin now with this breath. Before anything else is understood, one truth must be felt. You are breathing right now, and that breath is not random. It is intelligent, it is responsive, it is deeply connected to everything happening within you. Long before you learned how to explain yourself to the world, your breath was already explaining you to existence. It adjusted to fear before you named fear. It softened in love before you understood love. It tightened in pain before you learned how to hide pain. The breath has always been honest, even when you were not. This is why returning to the breath feels strangely intimate, almost exposing. You are meeting yourself without masks, without language, without excuses. When you sit with your breathing, there is no room for pretending. You cannot convince the breath of something you are not. It reveals tension you didn't know you were carrying. It reveals sadness you buried under busyness. It reveals longing you distracted yourself from. This is not punishment. It is truth offering itself gently. Most people live their entire lives negotiating with illusions, trying to appear calm while chaos rages inside, trying to seem confident while fear dominates their decisions. The breath does not participate in these negotiations. It simply tells you where you are, and that honesty is the first doorway to freedom, because you cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot transcend what you deny. When you finally allow yourself to watch your breathing without judgment, without trying to fix it, a quiet acceptance begins to unfold. You stop arguing with your inner state. You stop labeling yourself as broken or weak. You start listening. And listening changes everything. Awareness begins not with effort but with humility. The humility to admit, this is how I am right now. From that admission, transformation becomes possible. Without it, growth is just performance. The breath teaches you to be real, and realness is far more powerful than perfection. As you continue this inner listening, another realization emerges. Your mind is almost never where your life is happening. Your body sits in one place, but your thoughts roam endlessly. You replay conversations that are over. You imagine futures that may never come. You rehearse mistakes. You anticipate rejection. You live in psychological time, not in reality. And this is why exhaustion has become normal. Not because life is too demanding, but because your attention is divided. The breath stands in quiet contrast to this chaos. It does not revisit yesterday. It does not prepare for tomorrow. It arrives fully in this moment and leaves fully in this moment. It knows no other way. When you follow the breath, you are gently pulled out of mental time and return to living time. This return feels unfamiliar at first. The mind resists it. It feels threatened by presence because presence dissolves its authority. The mind thrives on distraction. It needs DS, problems, to survive. When you sit with your breath, you are no longer feeding it stories. You are not fighting thoughts. You are simply not following them. This is a radical act. Over time, you begin to notice how much suffering was self-created through unconscious thinking. You see that peace was never missing. Attention was. As attention gathers in the breath, the mind begins to slow, not because you forced it, but because it has lost momentum. Thoughts still come, but they no longer carry the same weight. You watch them rise and fall like clouds passing through the sky, and you begin to sense yourself as the sky, not the weather. This shift does not make you detached from life. It makes you available to it. You are finally here, and here is where clarity lives. With presence established, a deeper shift occurs. The structure you once called me begins to loosen. The ego which survived by convincing you that every thought and emotion defined you starts to weaken. The ego is not an enemy, it is a habit of identification. I am angry, I am anxious, I am not enough. These statements feel true only because you have never stepped back to observe them. The moment you begin watching your breath, you create distance between awareness and experience. That distance is freedom. You are no longer fused with what arises inside you. You are witnessing it, and what can be witnessed cannot be you. This realization is subtle but revolutionary. It does not arrive with fireworks, it arrives with space. Space between impulse and action. Space between emotion and reaction. Space between thought and belief. In that space, choice is born. The ego loses power not because you attack it, but because you stop obeying it blindly. You no longer react automatically. You pause. You feel. You breathe, and that pause changes the quality of your life. Conflicts soften, fear loses urgency, identity becomes fluid instead of rigid. You still function in the world, but you are no longer imprisoned by labels. You stop carrying emotional baggage as if it defines you. You begin to travel lighter. This is not detachment, it is maturity. You care deeply, but you are not possessed. You love fully, but you are not dependent. You act responsibly, but you are not controlled by fear. The breath trains you in this art of witnessing until it becomes natural. Awareness spills into everyday life. You notice yourself before reacting. You listen instead of defending. You respond instead of exploding. This is how inner freedom takes root, quietly, steadily, without drama. As awareness deepens, the breath introduces you to one of life's greatest lessons, letting go. Not as an idea, but as a lived rhythm. Every inhale is a receiving, every exhale is a release. The body does this effortlessly, but the mind resists it constantly. The mind wants to hold on to people, to outcomes, to control, to identity. It believes holding equals safety. But the breath reveals a different truth. Holding creates tension, and tension creates suffering. When you observe the exhale fully leaving the body, there is a moment of vulnerability, a moment where nothing is happening. The mind panics there. It wants to rush into the next inhale, the next thought, the next distraction. But if you stay, if you trust that space, you discover something astonishing. You are still here. You are supported. You are not falling apart. That moment teaches you more about life than any philosophy. It shows you that release is not dangerous. It is necessary. You begin to see how much pain you created by refusing to let go, of relationships that ended, of versions of yourself that no longer exist, of expectations that suffocated your joy. The breath gently retrains you. It shows you that life moves in cycles. Nothing is meant to be held forever. And when you align with this rhythm, resistance softens. You stop fighting change. You stop clinging to certainty. You learn to trust flow. This trust transforms how you face loss, uncertainty, and endings. You still feel grief, but it moves through you instead of lodging inside you. You still feel fear, but it doesn't paralyze you. You become resilient not because life becomes predictable, but because you stop demanding that it be. Letting go becomes wisdom, and wisdom brings peace. From this surrender emerges mastery, not control through force, but regulation through understanding. The breath reveals itself as the gateway between the body and the mind. It moves automatically, yet responds to awareness. This makes it uniquely powerful. When the breath is rushed, the nervous system is on alert. When the breath slows, the body receives a signal of safety. And when the body feels safe, the mind relaxes. You no longer need to argue with thoughts. You don't need to suppress emotions. You regulate the system from its foundation. Conscious breathing becomes your anchor in moments of stress. Instead of reacting impulsively, you breathe. Instead of panicking, you ground yourself. Over time, your nervous system learns resilience. You recover faster from emotional triggers. You remain present in difficult conversations. You don't lose yourself in chaos. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional intelligence. You feel fully without being overwhelmed. Calm becomes your baseline, not because life is easy, but because you are centered. This mastery spills into every area of life. Decisions become clearer, actions become intentional. You stop wasting energy on inner conflict. When the mind quiets, the heart becomes audible. compass. Iron deepens, listening improves, relationships transform because you are no longer projecting unresolved tension. This is the power of the breath. It doesn't just calm you, it aligns you. And then comes the most sacred discovery, the pause. The space between breaths, that silent gap after the exhale and before the inhale. It is so brief, so delicate that it is usually missed. Yet it holds the deepest truth. In that gap there is no thought, no identity, no story, no time. There is only being. The mind fears this space because it cannot exist there. But when you rest in it even for a second, you experience a peace that does not depend on circumstances. This is not excitement, it is not pleasure, it is completeness. Many people touch this unknowingly, in moments of awe, deep love, shock, or silence, and call it grace. Conscious breathing allows you to enter it deliberately. You learn to stay without rushing, to trust stillness, to relax into nothingness without fear. And in doing so, you discover that nothingness is not empty, it is alive, it is aware, it is home. This realization changes your relationship with silence. You no longer need constant stimulation. You no longer fear being alone. You no longer fill every gap with noise. Stillness becomes nourishing. You begin to live from depth rather than distraction. And once you have tasted this, something irreversible happens. You cannot fully believe the mind again when it tells you happiness is somewhere else. You have touched wholeness without achievement. You have felt meaning without explanation. Finally, this awareness leaves the meditation cushion and enters life itself. When breath becomes conscious, living becomes sacred. Not dramatic, not religious. Sacred in the sense of being deeply respected. You stop rushing through days. You stop postponing joy. You meet life directly. Ordinary moments regain their color. Walking becomes grounding. Eating becomes appreciation. Listening becomes connection. You are no longer half present. You are here. This presence naturally births gratitude, not forced gratitude, but quiet appreciation. You begin to treat people with more care, not because of morality, but because awareness softens you. Fear of death loosens because you understand impermanence intimately. Every breath comes and goes, yet something remains watching. That knowing dissolves existential anxiety. You realize life is not something to conquer, it is something to participate in. Purpose is no longer a question, it becomes a quality of attention. You live purposefully because you live consciously. And this is the timeless insight echoed by Osho. Life is not about reaching somewhere else, it is about arriving fully where you are. The depth of your awareness determines the depth of your life. You don't need to escape the world. You don't need to become someone new. You only need to breathe and be present. Everything else unfolds naturally from there. Before you try to understand anything deep about life, pause for a moment and notice one simple fact. You are breathing. You did not plan it. You did not command it. It is happening on its own. This simple movement in and out of your body has been with you from your first moment on this earth, and it will stay with you until your last. Yet almost nobody pays attention to it. We search for meaning in books, in people, in success, in struggle, while the most basic wisdom keeps moving quietly inside us. Breath is not just air. It is a living connection between your body, your mind, and something deeper that words cannot fully explain. Long before you learned how to speak, your breath already knew how you felt. It reacted to fear, to safety, to joy, to pain. It never learned how to pretend. It never learned how to hide. That is why breath is honest. When you begin to watch it, you meet yourself as you truly are, not as you wish to appear. Most people spend their lives wearing invisible masks. They say they are fine when they are not. They say they are strong while they are exhausted inside. They keep moving because stopping feels uncomfortable. But the breath does not wear masks. If you are tense, it becomes tight. If you are afraid, it becomes shallow. If you are calm, it flows naturally. This is not a mistake of the body, it is intelligence. The body is constantly communicating with you, but you have been trained not to listen. From childhood, you were taught to listen to noise, to opinions, to instructions, expectations. Very few people were taught how to listen inward. So you grew up disconnected from your own inner signals. Watching the breath brings that connection back. At first, it may feel strange. You may notice how restless you are, how tense your body feels, how quickly your mind jumps from one thought to another. This can feel uncomfortable, but it is not a problem. It is awareness waking up. You are not becoming restless, you are noticing the restlessness that was already there. This is an important difference. Awareness does not create problems. It reveals them so they can dissolve. As you continue to observe your breathing, another truth becomes clear. Your mind is rarely where you are. Your body sits in one place, but your thoughts travel constantly. You think about yesterday's mistakes. You worry about tomorrow's outcomes. You replay conversations. You imagine futures that may never happen. This movement feels normal because you have lived this way for so long, but it creates deep exhaustion, not physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion. You feel tired even after resting because your mind never rests. The breath, however, does not travel. It is always here. It does not carry memories. It does not plan ahead. It rises now and falls now. When you bring your attention to the breath, you are gently pulled back into the present moment. At first, the mind resists. It tries to pull you back into thinking. It creates urgency. It tells you that you're wasting time. This is because the mind survives on movement. Presence weakens its control. But if you keep returning to the breath softly, without force, the mind slowly loses speed. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer drag you with them. You begin to see them instead of being trapped inside them. This changes everything. You realize that peace was never missing. You were just not present enough to notice it. With this presence, something deeper begins to shift. The sense of I that you have carried for years starts to feel less solid. Normally you believe that whatever you feel or think is who you are. If anger appears, you say, I am angry. If fear appears, you say, I am afraid. If sadness comes, you say, this is me. But when you watch your breath, you notice something quietly powerful. You are watching these experiences, and whatever you can watch cannot be you. This does not mean emotions disappear. They still come and go, but you are no longer drowning in them. You are standing on the shore, aware of the waves. This awareness creates space. In that space, reactions slow down. You pause before speaking, you pause before acting, you pause before judging yourself or others. That pause is freedom. It is not something dramatic. It is subtle, but it changes your entire life. You stop being controlled by every emotion. You stop being pushed around by every thought. You are still human, still feeling, still caring, but you are no longer unconscious. The ego, which lived by convincing you that everything inside you was you, slowly loses its grip. You do not fight it, you do not destroy it. You simply stop feeding it with blind belief. Awareness does the work naturally. As awareness grows, the breath begins to teach you something very important about letting go. Watch closely how breathing works. You take in air without effort, and then you release it. You do not hold on to the inhale forever. You trust that another breath will come. But emotionally, most people do the opposite. They hold on tightly to people, to memories, to pain, to control. They fear that if they let go, something terrible will happen, but the breath shows you otherwise. Every exhale is a small lesson in trust. When the air leaves your body, there is a brief moment where nothing is happening. Many people rush past this moment. They inhale quickly, almost nervously. This rushing reflects how they live. They fear empty space. They fear not knowing. They fear losing control. But if you relax into that small pause, you discover that you are still safe. You are still supported. Nothing collapses. This realization slowly spreads into life. You begin to let go of what no longer serves you. You stop forcing situations that are not aligned. You stop carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be permanent. Letting go no longer feels like weakness. It feels like relief. You begin to understand that life moves in cycles, just like breath. Holding on too long creates pain. Releasing creates space. And space allows new life to enter. From this understanding, a quiet mastery develops. Not control through force, but balance through awareness. The breath becomes your anchor in difficult moments. When stress appears, you notice your breathing and slow it down gently. When fear arises, you breathe deeper instead of panicking. The body receives a message of safety and the mind follows. This is how the breath becomes a bridge between the body and the mind. You stop trying to control thoughts directly. You work with the system instead of against it. Over time, your nervous system becomes more stable. You recover faster from stress. You remain calmer in situations that once overwhelmed you. This does not make you numb. It makes you present. You feel emotions fully, but they no longer control you. You listen better. You speak with more care. You act with clarity instead of impulse. This is real strength, not the strength of suppression, but the strength of understanding. Then slowly, you begin to notice something even more subtle. Between one breath and the next, there is a tiny pause. After the exhale finishes and before the next inhale begins, there is a moment of stillness. This moment is usually missed because it is so quiet. But in this stillness, there is no thought, no story, no identity. There is just being. Time seems to disappear. The mind becomes silent because it has nothing to hold on to. At first, this pause may feel uncomfortable. The mind is not used to silence. It wants to fill the space. But if you stay relaxed and allow the pause to exist, you may feel a deep peace that has no reason. It is not happiness caused by something. It is calm without explanation. Many people experience this unknowingly, in moments of deep love, beauty, shock, or stillness, and they call it grace. Conscious breathing allows you to touch this space deliberately. And once you do, even briefly, something changes. You realize that completeness does not depend on achievement. Meaning does not depend on struggle. You can be whole without becoming someone else. As this awareness deepens, it does not stay confined to quiet moments. It enters your daily life. When breath becomes conscious, life becomes more alive. You stop rushing through days. You stop living only for outcomes. You begin to experience moments fully. Walking feels grounding. Eating feels nourishing. Listening feels connecting. You are no longer half present. Gratitude arises naturally, not as a practice, but as a response to presence. You begin to treat people with more kindness because awareness softens you. Even challenges feel different. You still face them, but you do not lose yourself inside them. Fear of death also softens. because you see impermanence clearly. Every breath comes and goes, yet something remains aware. You realize that endings are part of life, not enemies of it. Purpose no longer feels like a question you must answer. It becomes a way of living, living with attention, honesty, and care. This is the simple yet profound message echoed again and again by Osho. Life is not something you need to conquer or escape. It is something you need to enter fully. The depth of your awareness decides the depth of your life. You do not need to search far. You do not need to become extraordinary. You only need to return to what has always been with you. One breath, one moment, one quiet awareness. From that, everything real begins. And now, as everything settles into silence, remember this simple, timeless truth. Life does not ask you to become perfect, powerful, or extraordinary. Life asks you to be present. Faith is not blind belief in something far away. It is deep trust in this moment. In this breath, in the intelligence that is already carrying you. When you trust life, fear loses its grip. When you trust your inner awareness, confusion fades. You don't need to wait for a better time, a different version of yourself, or clearer circumstances. Transformation does not begin someday, it begins now, with one conscious breath, with one honest pause, with one courageous choice to live awake. If you can breathe with awareness today, you can live with purpose tomorrow. Walk forward with trust, act with clarity, and remember, when you honor the breath, you honor life itself.